"Hello, stranger," she said as I turned around, feeling a touch on my shoulder. Her name was Crystal Lawler, and the last time I saw her, she was having sex with some guy in my back seat. Crystal and I grew up as neighbors. My family moved next door to her family when I was 7 and she was 9. She and I were never best friends, never dated or had sex, but we enjoyed each other's company. We were together at a party that night when I caught her in the back seat because her boyfriend David was sick and I didn't have a date. Crystal knew this and needed a ride, so she asked me to drive her. The guy she had sex with was her ex-boyfriend, and they were reminiscing about old times, so she said, "Just don't tell David." I grinned, remembering that night. "Hey, Crystal, what are you doing here?" she asked. By here, she meant the party we both attended. It was a fundraiser organized by the city. In the previous 14 months, Mother Nature had shown that she hated us. We had been hit with 2 major hurricanes, a tropical storm, severe flooding, and a tornado. The entire town was exhausted, and many residents fought with their insurance companies to cover damages caused by one or more of Mother Nature's plagues aimed at us. There was much discussion and negotiation between homeowners and insurance companies about whether the damage to buildings was caused by falling water, in which case the insurance company paid, or rising water, in which case federal flood insurance paid. And some insurance companies did not want to pay for any damage, regardless of how it was done. Families were still living in trailers and tents because their homes had not been repaired since the first hurricane 14 months earlier, and the federal government had turned its attention to bigger problems without paying attention to our small town. So the city fathers and mothers and individual citizens organized a fundraiser to help those who had problems. At these sit-ins, gumbo was favored, with beans and rice coming in second. I sat with 3 of my friends. We all took our minds off of helping clean up wherever we were needed for the evening and enjoyed the fundraiser. The party was held at the largest park in town, on the shore of the lake. We were sitting at a picnic table enjoying some gumbo when I felt Crystal touch my shoulder. I introduced her to my friends, one of whom invited her to join us. She accepted, and for the next hour my friends individually and collectively tried to get her a date. She sat and laughed with us until she finished her beer and then moved on. No one said a word as we watched her. She threw the crowd. When she was out of sight, my friends all started talking at once about how perfect she was. I decided not to say anything, and no one would have heard me, given the chatter of the other 3. Like most men's conversations about women, this one only lasted until another perfect ass floated by. So Crystal departed, and we continued eating gumbo and drinking beer. We were just finishing up when the mayor spoke, congratulating us on our successes, but begging us to do more. He was a good speaker, and by the time he was done, my friends and I had another beer and were about to get back to work, but stopped when we heard Zydeco music. For those of you who live north of Interstate 10 and who we think of as Yankees, Zydeco is music that originated in our part of the country thanks to the French Creoles, and it is a blend of blues, rhythm and blues, and music indigenous to Louisiana Creoles and Louisiana natives. There is little difference between Zydeco and Cajun music, and neither is easy to dance to, but a combination of one-step dancing and swaying is usually enough. It didn't take long for the 4 of us to find dance partners, and we joined dozens of other couples dancing on the grass. I use the term dancing loosely because, in addition to dancing being difficult as it was, dancing on the grass got even worse. As a result, dancing turned into swaying to the music, accompanied by periodic rubbing of bodies against each other. My dance partner was the daughter of one of our most successful attorneys. I had seen him on TV when he was advertising his practice. His commercials always ended with "Win with Wilson." I'd seen her around but never talked to her until she asked me to dance at that picnic. We ended up spending the rest of the afternoon and evening together. All thoughts of going back to work faded away when she turned her back to me while dancing, and I watched her sway. Her name was Lauren. She and I were the same age. Both graduated from the local university the same year, but we had never met. She worked as a secretary in her father's office, and I taught history and math to some of the smartest high school students in America, and some of the ones who weren't capable of learning even if you pounded it into them. The party dragged on into the night, and Lauren and I were among the last to leave. We arrived in separate cars and left that way, but the date was set for the following Friday. It's amazing how things work out. I rarely saw Lauren before the party, but the following week I saw her 3 times. The party was on Saturday. The first time I saw her was the next day at the mall when she was walking with a guy. It was normal. He could have been a brother, a cousin, or just a friend. No big deal. The second time was in a pickup truck. She was sitting next to the driver, and he looked like that guy from the mall. Mark and I were helping load and haul debris from the streets when they drove by. Then there was a third time. It was a Thursday and the day before she and I were supposed to go on a date. We have a country club in our town. We also have a private restaurant. If you are a member of one of these, chances are you have been a member of both. My family was an exception. We were members of the private restaurant, but not the country club. Not because it was too expensive, but because none of us played golf or tennis. However, we loved to eat good food, and both clubs were reciprocal when it came to catering. So I celebrated my mom's birthday at the country club with my parents, sister, and a few close friends and relatives. Our private dining room adjoined the dance floor, and we were halfway through dinner when I had to pee and saw Lauren dancing with a man. It wouldn't have been anything if it weren't for the fact that I had invited her to have dinner with us that night, and she said she couldn't because she was having dinner with 2 of her girlfriends. I watched them dance, and the intimacy, including long kisses and wandering hands, indicated that this wasn't a first date. I knew this man. He was the coach of my high school soccer team. He wasn't a teacher, but he owned the biggest pizza place in town. He and I weren't close, but we knew each other. I couldn't help but glance at them occasionally. As far as I could tell, they didn't see me, or if they did, they didn't make any sign of it. We finished the party and left. In my apartment, I pondered whether I wanted to go on a date with someone who was so obviously close to someone else and who had lied to me. At the same time, if she was intimate with one man, why would she agree to go on a date with another? I was perplexed. The next day at school, I decided to look for Coach. I saw him in the hallway. "Hey, Tom. I saw you at the club last night. Isn't that Lauren Richard you were with?" In Cajun country, Richard is pronounced Richard. "Yes. Do you know her?" "Hardly. Are you two serious?" "I think I do. We've been dating for 7 months." "Good for you. See you later." And I left. Our date was set for that night, but there was no way I wanted to go out with her, knowing that she was seeing someone else on a regular basis. Perhaps the seriousness was only on Tom's part, but regardless, I felt uneasy. So I called her. "Hello, Jackson," she said. "My name is Jackson Abear, pronounced a bear in Cajun country. I was just thinking about you." "I've been thinking about you too," I objected. "I think we should cancel tonight." "Why? Are you okay?" I decided that the meeting with Maul was not worth mentioning, so I got right to the point. "You may recall that I invited you to dinner with me and my family last night." "True, but I couldn't." "That's right. Then I saw you dancing." "Oh, that was Tom." "It's no big deal. We've known each other forever." "That's a good thing. Old friends are good. It's like having old girlfriends." "What do your old girlfriends have to do with this?" "I'm not talking about my old girlfriends. I'm talking about yours." "What do you mean?" "You said you can't come to dinner with us because you're going with 2 girlfriends." "Yes, it was." "And then we ran into Tom. I saw them when they weren't dancing yet, and they were sitting at a table for 2." "Where were your girlfriends sitting?" "What do you mean?" You know what I mean. You lied to me about last night, and I don't date liars. Goodbye. That was the end of it. Over the next few weeks, Tom and I continued to see each other. We would meet in the living room and chat. Lauren never became a topic of conversation until one Friday afternoon when Tom seemed a little depressed. Is something wrong? I asked. Not really. I had a date, but she canceled it and now I have nothing to do tonight. That's too bad. Why did she cancel? She's going out with her girlfriends for a bachelorette party. That's too bad. Are you still seeing Lauren? Yeah. She's the one who blew off the date. Well, I'm sure you'll find something to do. I went back to class. That evening, my best friend Mark and I went to one of our 3 casinos to play blackjack. We didn't do it often, but when we did, it was fun. I raised about $60. When I felt a touch on my shoulder, I turned around. Crystal and Lauren were standing there. Hey, stranger, Crystal said. I always seem to be tapping you on the shoulder. Looks like it. I understand you know my friend Lauren. Indeed I do. How are you doing, Lauren? I'm fine. And how are you? I'm fine. Do you have a minute to chat? The cards got cold over a few hands, so I said sure. Picked up my chips, told Mark I'd see him later, and started to leave. Oh, no you don't, he said. You're not leaving me here while you go off with 2 girls. He picked up his chips, and all 4 of us headed for the nearest bar. There were 3 bars in this casino. The one we walked into was dedicated to country and western. We found a table, spread our chips on it, and sat down. No sooner were we seated than the serving lady asked what we wanted, and we placed our order. Crystal asked Mark to dance, and Lauren and I sat down. We all ordered a beer, and it was already on the table as Lauren and I sat down. The service was very quick. We both took a sip and looked at each other. I lied to you, she said. I lied to you. And I'm sorry. I looked at her. That's water under the bridge. Do I get another chance? I don't think so. When trust is broken, what's left? If we started dating and you couldn't do it for some reason, I wouldn't know if you were lying or not. I just wouldn't be able to trust you. We were just sitting there looking at our beers and were silent when Crystal and Mark came back. Everything okay? Crystal asked. Lauren stood up and grabbed her purse. Let's go, she said. Crystal looked at me as I took a sip of my beer. You're an idiot, she told me. You're ruining a good thing. I looked at her. I didn't blow him off. She did. What's going on? Mark asked, sitting down and taking one of the 2 full mugs of beer. I told him the story while we drank. When I finished, he just looked at me. Are you out of your mind? I mean, she's hot. And she lied. Haven't you ever lied to a girl before? Jesus, Jackson. She can lie to me all she wants. We sat and finished our beers while he pestered me about being a complete idiot. When he was done, we paid the bill, picked up our chips, cashed out, and headed home. I didn't lose sleep over Lauren, but I did fall asleep thinking about what it would be like to sleep with her. For the next few weeks, my social life was practically non-existent. Not that I had time for a social life. We were still getting cleaned up after the hurricane, but I managed to have 2 meetings over drinks with women I'd been introduced to, but they went nowhere. It was the end of the school year, and the teachers had a dinner at the country club. After dinner, I danced with one of the new teachers, but again, with no emotional involvement. I was leading her to a table when I saw Lauren sitting alone behind the bar. I thought, what the hell? I was bored at my table, so I decided to at least say hello. I walked over to my table, grabbed my drink, and joined her. She jerked her head in my direction when I sat down. Is that okay with you? I asked. It's a free country. She faltered, then added, I didn't know you were a member of the country club. No. This is the school board president, and she booked it for us. And who booked it last time so you could come here? I looked at her, stood up, and raised my glass. See ya. Wait. Where are you going? Sit down. No thanks. I know when someone is looking over my shoulder and I don't need it. Jackson, that's not what I meant. Come back. I walked back to my table. I barely had time to sit down before she appeared. Jackson, I'm sorry. I'm half drunk and I didn't mean it. Come back and let's talk. In vino veritas? Go away, Lauren. Go home or go to a bar, but go. Jackson, please. I got up, said good night to the people at my table, and as I left, I heard Jackson, please. 30 minutes later, I was home. The summer went by quickly. Mark and I went to the casino a few times. We didn't go to gamble, we went to pick up women. We succeeded and we got laid every time we went, so my summer was a success. School started up again in the fall and the first person I met was Tom. ¿Qué pasa, Jackson? What's going on? He asked cheerfully. Not very much, Tom. How about you? Pretty much the same thing, just on a different day. Oh, there is one thing. Do you remember Lauren, the girl I used to date? Yes. As I recall, you and her were very serious. He chuckled. Well, I was anyway. Oh, sorry about that. Why? You had nothing to do with it. What's wrong? I don't know exactly. One moment we were dating, and the next moment I realized we weren't even talking. So, who is she dating? That's the funny thing. No one, as far as we can tell. Nick Thompson asked her out 3 times before she agreed to go out with him. Sounds like she just wants to be talked into it. Our school had a new music teacher. She was hired from the north and was new to the south. I met her in the teacher's lounge on the first day of school, which was Monday. By Friday, I asked her out on a date, which was Saturday. 2 days later, we were called into the principal's office and told that we were breaking the rules by dating. For some reason, 2 unmarried teachers working at the same school were not allowed to date, but if we worked at different schools in the same system, it would be okay. We thought it was a stupid rule, but we tried to live up to it. It went on like this for 3 weeks, after which she and I had dinner together and then suddenly had sex. For the next few months, we had our clandestine meetings and were perfectly happy, and then we stopped. Karen, that was her name, was visited by her college boyfriend. He came to visit but decided to stay. That ended our relationship in short order, and then came Thanksgiving and a week-long vacation from school. On Friday night, Mark and I were having dinner at a private restaurant when Crystal and Lauren walked in. They approached our table and asked if they could join us. Mark jumped to his feet and pulled up a chair for one of them before I could answer. Then one of the waiters took the other chair. Our entrees hadn't arrived yet, so we asked the waiter to wait until the girls had ordered. The waiter brought 2 extra servings and a menu. Dinner turned out to be a pleasant evening. We shared a couple bottles of wine. After dinner, Mark, who had spent almost the entire dinner talking to Lauren, suggested we go to one of the local bars and dance. I was hesitant, but the girls thought it was a good idea, so we went. They drove their car, and we drove mine. Mark kept Lauren on the dance floor and Crystal and I danced a couple times, but spent most of our time sitting at a table and watching the dance floor. Finally, Mark went to the bathroom and Lauren asked me to dance. I hesitated but said yes. It was a slow number, and she pressed herself against me. It felt good. Then she threw her head back, looked at me, and said, "We've never had a real date, have we?" "No." "And that's my fault, isn't it? Because I lied to you." "That's right. Can we start over?" I just looked at her and asked why. At that moment, the music stopped. We stood there looking at each other. "Remember the other time we danced?" "Yes." "It was the night you asked me out." "Yes, it is." That night I felt something. Something I had never felt before. It was like a connection and I wanted more. However, the next week I saw you with some other guys. With one of them the night before we were supposed to go out. Then I lied. Yes, it is. I can't explain it. I wanted to go out with you, but I lied. I guess I was afraid. What? I don't know. We were still standing on the dance floor looking at each other, and the whole room was looking at us. Then the music started up again, and we started dancing and talking. Then you were very indulgent that night at the country club. I was drunk. You can't blame me for that. She stopped dancing and looked at me. I've lied and acted like a snob before, but I've never felt bad about it until now. It's all about you. There's something about you that makes me feel like I don't know how I feel anymore. One night with you and everything changed. What's different? Better? Worse? I don't know. I feel guilty and sad, but I know it will get better because you will make it better. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. We finished the dance in silence and walked back to our table. Mark and Crystal were sitting there talking. Mark, I think it's time to go, I said. He looked at Crystal. Are you ready to go? He'd been dancing with Lauren for most of the time we'd been there. I wondered if he remembered what he'd said when I told him she'd lied. Something about sex. In the short time Lauren and I were on the dance floor, Crystal seemed to have gotten his attention. Not really. Lauren, are you ready? I think so. Then she looked at me. If it's okay, I'll go with you, and these two can stay. I looked at Mark and he shook his head vigorously. Yes. Yes. That's good. Crystal can take me home. Right, Crystal? Sure. And she smiled at Mark, who smiled back. Okay. Ready? I asked Lauren. She nodded, grabbed her purse, and we left. In the car, she told me where she lived, and I went there. We did not speak the whole way. I pulled up to her house, got out of the car, and walked over to open her door, but she had already opened it and was getting out of the car. I walked her to the door while she got her keys out. At the door, she unlocked and opened it. Good night, I said. Good night. Thanks for the ride. You're welcome. I started to walk away. Jackson? Yeah? Will you have dinner with me tomorrow? I guess it was the way she smiled or the way she looked, but it only took me 2 seconds to respond. What time should I pick you up? 6:30. She smiled broadly. Okay. I'll see you then. We went to one of two good Italian restaurants in town and avoided going to the country club and a private restaurant. It was a very pleasant evening that ended with a peck on the cheeks for both of us and a new date after Thanksgiving. We had 2 dates between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Mark and Crystal had 5 or 6. I can't say for sure, but I think their last date lasted all night. Her parents always threw a huge party on New Year's Eve. I had heard of them, but never had the opportunity to be invited until that New Year's Eve night. I accepted the invitation. Their house was on the shore of the lake and was one of the largest in town. Lauren met me at the door and immediately led me over to where her parents were standing and talking to the other guests. Excuse me, Mom, Dad, can I talk to you for a second? They apologized and turned to their daughter. Mom, Dad, this is Jackson Abear. Jackson, these are my parents, John and Colleen Wilson. How do you do? Thanks for having me over, said I. My pleasure, Jackson. Lauren told us about you, and we're glad you could make it. This was followed by several minutes of detailed questioning of her father, which didn't make me the least bit uncomfortable, but I could feel everyone in the room looking at me. I chuckled a little, imagining him doing the same thing in the courtroom. Finally, Lauren pulled me away from the Inquisition, and we headed for the bar. Some of the guests I knew by sight because I'd seen them on TV or in the newspaper for one reason or another. Shortly before midnight, she took me upstairs to show me her old room, and it was there when we heard everyone downstairs shouting, "Happy New Year," that we kissed lips to lips for the first time. It was a very nice, long, soft kiss, and although it was long, it ended all too quickly. Lauren and I dated for 10 months before I moved in with her. It was another 2 years before we were married. Mark and Crystal were 6 months ahead of us. Our marriage was beginning its 2nd year. I had discovered that with a little time and patience, Lauren could be talked into just about anything. I was driving to Mark's one day, and I had a flat tire. I was getting the jack out of the trunk when I discovered that my spare tire was also flat. I pulled out my phone to call Mark and ask him to come over when a bright orange pickup truck stopped to see if I needed help. I'd seen bright orange trucks before and could only assume there weren't many. We put the spare in the pickup and headed out for repairs. I pulled out my phone again to call Mark and have him meet me at the tire shop to take me back to my car, but got distracted again to finish the conversation. I sat in the cab of the truck, the sun beating down on my eyes, and I reached up to lower the sun visor. As I did so, a picture of a woman in a bikini came into my face. The picture was familiar to me because I had taken it in Cancun 3 months earlier. I put my phone away and stared at the picture. The driver was an older man and spoke. Pretty little thing, isn't she? Yes. Very attractive. Who is she? That's my son's new girlfriend, he laughed. A girl for crying out loud. She's just another unsatisfied married bitch looking for a good time. He has them all the time, you lucky bastard. He has pictures of all his conquests? Of what? His unsatisfied married bitches. Oh no. He stole them. It fell out of her purse. He picked it up and talked her into keeping it. He laughed out loud. If he was able to talk her out of some girl, then getting that jug was the easy part. So, he talked her out of some girl? I hope he spits in your flask. How long have they been together? Oh, for a few weeks now. How did he meet her? He was in an accident with my truck, and she works for his lawyer. Oh, isn't that your truck? No. He wrecked mine. It's not his. What's with them now? They're at our fishing camp right now, probably doing the dirty work if you know what I mean. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I pulled back the sun visor and called Mark. That was the end of the call. Lauren was supposed to be in New Orleans, shopping with her mother. Where is your campground located? We have one on Big Lake, I asked, but it was a lie. We didn't have a campground, but I knew there were plenty of them out there. It's the same place as our house. It's the green shack on Sandy Road by the boat ramp. I knew exactly where it was. We drove there for nothing. We ended the ride in silence, and I thanked him for the ride. By the time Mark got there, the tire was repaired. On the way back to the car, I told him all about it. We replaced the tire, found a parking spot nearby, and headed to Big Lake in his car. We parked on a very narrow road in front of a green shack, got out of the car, and walked around it to see if it had windows. Fishing camps came in all different sizes and shapes. A shack like this green one could stand next to $1 million house, but they were both called camps. We found an open window and heard the sounds of people dirty working before we looked inside. I took 4 pictures of the couple before we got back in his car and drove off. Lauren and her mother weren't due back until the following evening, so I had time to move my stuff over to Mark's place. When we got there, Crystal asked what was going on and we told her. Did she see you taking the pictures? She asked. I don't think so. She was very busy at the time. Crystal picked up the phone. If you call her, I'm going to be very upset, Mark told her. She slowly put the phone back on the table. What are you going to do? She asked. Divorce her. That's it? You're not going to talk to her? No. You don't have to. Don't you want to ask why? I don't care why. She cheated. That's all I need to know. All my stuff was in Mark's house and garage when I left for Lauren's parents' house. Her father opened the door. What's up, Jackson? He asked, inviting me in. I stayed where I was. I just came to tell you that I'm getting a lawyer on Monday. I'm divorcing Lauren. Bullshit. I'm serious. She is currently at the fishing camp of one of your clients. I have 4 pictures of them in bed together. I don't believe you. Would you like to see pictures? You bet. And if you're lying. I pulled out my phone and looked for the least graphic picture, though they were all basically the same and the faces were very clear, so there was no doubt it was her. Oh my God. And you're saying she's with him now? She was here about 4 hours ago. I assume she's still there. Where are they? I told him that, and he closed the door in my face, but I heard him calling for his wife. Colleen, come with me. Now. I'll explain everything on the way. I was in my car and driving down the street when they passed me with a high fuel consumption. It was almost midnight when my phone rang. It was Lauren. I ignored it and turned the phone off. She rang Mark and Crystal's doorbell at 7 in the morning. We were sitting at the kitchen island drinking coffee. Crystal let her in and walked over to me. I was in no mood to accept her apology. You son of a bitch. How could you do that? An apology? It didn't really sound like an apology. I looked at her. Do what? Show such a picture to my father. I told him you were cheating and he wanted proof, and I provided it to him. You didn't have to do that, Jackson. To my father as much as anyone else. I turned back to my coffee. What happens now? I turned to her again. Jesus, Lauren. What do you think is going to happen now? Do you think I'll forget this happened? You can try. No, I can't and I won't. I'll get a lawyer and start filing for divorce. She touched my shoulder. Please, Jackson. Go away, Lauren. Mark, will you talk to him? Please? I agree with him. I think you'd better leave. Crystal, will you? Crystal stood up and led her to the door. Go home, Lauren. We'll talk later. I started calling lawyers on Monday morning. I was in school, so I didn't have much time, but by the end of class on Tuesday, I had already made an appointment. I interviewed 3 lawyers that week and I didn't like any of them. Lauren made no attempt to contact me, although she and Crystal spoke several times. According to Lauren, she met this guy at her father's office when he came in to talk about the accident he was in. The accident was not his fault, so he sued the other party. He was a slick-talking good old Southern guy and chatted up Lauren every time he came over, was funny, friendly, persuasive, and didn't take no for an answer when he asked her out. Eventually, one day she agreed to have a drink after work. That one time turned into 4, and those turned into 2 visits to his fishing camp. She stated to Crystal that she wasn't unhappy with our marriage. It was just that the guy wore her down and talked her into it. She didn't make any excuses except that she'd fallen for his bullshit. When I heard that, I thought this guy would make one hell of a salesman, and that plus the fact that Lauren could be talked into anything under the right circumstances. When Crystal was asked if she had ever cheated before, she said she hadn't. I finally found a lawyer I liked, and the divorce went smoothly. I walked away without having to pay her anything, plus I got half of her house, which I took. Apparently, her parents wouldn't give her money for my share, so she had to sell it. Her selling it didn't bother me one bit. I was able to buy my own house with my share. Before I bought my new house, I was living in an apartment, and I wish I could say I was enjoying life, but I wasn't. It took a few months before I started going on dates again, and there were very few. Lauren insisted that we purchase a membership at the country club, which we did, and she and the club professional taught me how to play golf, and to my surprise, I loved it. The initial membership fee was quite large, but it was paid for by her parents. The membership was in my name and the annual dues were reasonable, so I kept paying them and going to the club to continue learning to play golf. Once in a while I'd see Lauren there and we'd exchange greetings, but nothing more. I took my dates there for dinner a couple times over the next year. One Saturday afternoon, I, along with 3 other club members, finished a round of golf. When I came out of the locker room, Lauren was in the clubhouse and asked if I would eat a sandwich with her. I did. We ate sandwiches, I drank beer, and we chatted. We even managed to laugh a little. When we were done, I told her I had to leave. Why? Do you have a date? No. No date. Are you seeing anyone? No. Me too. Not even with a lover? She turned bright red. No. No one. There was a long pause and I started to walk away, but she grabbed my arm and I stopped. I screwed up, Jackson. I had no reason to cheat, but I did, and I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know that. I nodded, got up, and left. The next 2 years flew by pretty quickly. Crystal and Mark had a son and named him Jackson, and I was still teaching and still loving it. Jackson 2, or more often just 2 as Mark and Crystal called their son, was celebrating his first birthday. I knew Crystal was in a relationship with Lauren, and she was at the party when I arrived. I saw her from time to time, but hadn't spoken to her since that day at the club when we ate sandwiches and drank beer together. Crystal made it a rule not to talk about her in my presence, and what she heard from Lauren and later told Mark stayed with him. They knew I didn't want to hear or talk about her, so they honored my request. She saw me first and came up to me. We hugged and said hello. She had gained at least 20 pounds and looked like her dog had just died. "How's it going?" she asked. "Not bad. How's it going?" "Great. Thank you." She didn't look her best, and I knew her well enough to know she knew it, but I wasn't about to open that can of worms. "You look good," I lied. "How are your parents?" "They're good. They told me they see you at the club. We run into each other sometimes. Dad says you're already a pretty good golfer. When there is a tournament, the results are posted for all to see. Over the past couple of years, my score has been steadily improving. Yes, I'm very pleased." We stood looking at each other until Crystal came in. "Lauren, there's someone I want you to meet." I watched as Lauren was introduced to a man about my age. After a few minutes, he stood alone and I introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Jackson Abear." "Keith Branson. Nice to meet you." "Likewise." "Are you a friend of Crystal's?" "I'm actually her cousin from Baton Rouge. I'm here for Tu's party." Just then, the light bulb came on. "Jackson? Are you the Jackson they named Toy after?" "Guilty. Nice to meet you. I just met a girl named Abear. Do you know her?" "I know her. But no, we're not related. I think Crystal wanted us to get together, but I don't know. She seems like a cold fish. You can't judge a book by its cover, you know." "I know, but she looks like she's in La La Land. Who knows these days?" We chatted for a couple more minutes before I left. The two were sitting in their high chair. Mark was holding a cake. We were all singing happy birthday to my 1-year-old namesake, and then I felt someone's presence. I looked over and it was Lauren. She was singing along with the rest of us. Mark blew out the single candle and we all applauded enthusiastically. Crystal cut the cake and handed out slices. Lauren stood next to me as we ate in silence. She stayed by my side for the rest of the party and walked out with me as I left. I walked her to her car and opened the door in front of her. "I have tickets to see Ada this Friday. Can you use them?" she asked. I loved the music from Ada and I really wanted to see it, but I didn't know it was coming to our town. Actually, it didn't come to our town. We've never had anything like it, but it did come to a town in Texas right on the state line. It was about 40 minutes away. I'd like to see it, but I hate driving alone, so I'll skip it, but thanks. If you don't have anyone to go with, I'll go. We don't have to go together. I can meet you there. Hell, I thought. If we're both going, I don't see any reason to take 2 cars. That's silly. We can drive together. Do you still live in the same house? She smiled. No. I bought a new one. She gave me the address. The evening was a lot of fun. The play was great, and hanging out with Lauren brought back a lot of fond memories. After the play, I drove her home and walked her to the door where I was invited for a nightcap. I declined and went home where I stayed up most of the night thinking about her. Lots of good thoughts, but the vision of her in bed with that other guy wouldn't go away. It didn't go away all week, so when she called and asked if we could have dinner together, I told her no and explained the reason. "I enjoyed going to the theater with you, but since then, all I've thought about is you in bed with another man. It has to do with the way you lied before, so I just can't trust you." "I understand, Jackson. It was the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and I will never forget it or stop regretting it. Goodbye." 2 days later, I had dinner with Mark and Crystal. "I know I shouldn't talk about Lauren," Crystal said, "but I will nonetheless. She loves you, Jackson, and she regrets what she did. She's trying to find a way to get you to forgive her. Couldn't you try?" "I've thought about it, but I can't. Marriage is built on trust. Trust that you will love each other and only each other. But it wasn't love. It was a moment of weakness. It wasn't just a moment. It was at least 6 moments. By her own admission, she met him 4 times and slept with him twice. People in love, in a relationship, married for God's sake don't let themselves get into situations where some slick talker can talk them into bed just for sex. He had no interest in her except one desire. I know, Jackson, but no buts, Cristal. She screwed up and it's over. Jesus, Crystal, leave it alone, said Mark. Don't get involved, Mark. She's my friend and I want to help her. Jackson is my friend and yours too, by the way, and you're meddling where you've been asked to stay out of. I don't care. She made a mistake and he should forgive her. Will you forgive me if I cheat? Absolutely not. Then why do you insist that Jackson forgive Lauren? They were still going back and forth and didn't let on that they knew when I was leaving. 2 hours later, Mark was at my house with 2 suitcases. He had been at my house for 2 days before he got a call from Crystal. They argued on the phone for a few minutes, after which Mark hung up. They talked 3 more times that week, and all 3 calls ended in arguments. 2 weeks went by. Mark and I went to his house to pick up the rest of his things. Crystal didn't try to stop him. By the time he had lived with me for 2 months, they hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. He stopped by Tu's house, but said he and Crystal had nothing to say to each other. Their marriage wasn't looking good. One Saturday morning, Mark and I were playing golf one Saturday morning. I was getting much better, but Mark only played when I insisted, and he was terrible. We were waiting for play to start on the first hole, and the starter asked us if we minded 2 more people joining us. We said no, and he introduced us to 2 women. I had seen them around but had no idea who they were. They were Judy Franklin and her sister Teresa Jenkins. We introduced ourselves and started playing. Mark went first and hit a nice straight shot at about 215 yards. It was the best shot of his life, and we looked at each other and laughed. I was next and made an even better looking shot at 225 yards. We went up to the women's tees and they both made a shot at about 140 yards each. I played the best round of my life that day and attributed it to the presence of the ladies. Despite the first shot, Mark stopped keeping score somewhere on the 7th hole. Later in the clubhouse over cheeseburgers, fries, and beer, we learned that both girls were divorced and both were MDs. Judy was an emergency room doctor and Teresa had a private practice. We decided to meet up the next morning to play another round of golf. Mark was spending time with 2 others, so he couldn't make it. I parked and was walking toward the clubhouse when a bright orange pickup truck drove past me. I watched as it parked in front of the maintenance garage. The driver got out of the car and headed toward the clubhouse. He was met by Lenny, the head custodian, who shook his hand and escorted him out. I equaled my score from the previous day and had even more fun. By the time we finished our hamburgers and beers at the 19th hole, Judy and I had made a date for the following Friday if she wasn't working. She didn't, and that date became one of the best dates of my life, and the next one was even better. The next week it was just Judy and me playing. After the game, I was in the locker room getting dressed after my shower when I heard a voice outside the window. She's a hot bitch. The windows weren't supposed to be open, but a couple of them were usually open so the smokers could let their smoke out since smoking was forbidden. Bullshit. You can't take it. You're not gonna make it to first base. Hide and watch. I caught that big lawyer's daughter a couple years ago before I went to jail, and now I'll get to the doctor, and maybe her sister too. Prison? What are you in jail for, and does Lenny know about it? Hell no. Don't tell him either. There was a brief pause as I heard scraping on the gravel around the building. I got in an accident and sued the people who hit me. They had money and I needed it, so I hired myself some tough lawyer. His daughter was his secretary. He laughed. She was married and didn't look too attractive, so I talked her into having sex with me. He laughed again. I saw her and her daddy here once or twice, but they didn't recognize me. I laugh heartily when I see them. They're all so tall and powerful, and I was having sex with her. You say she was married? Is she still married? I don't know. I got what I wanted. So that's why you went to jail? Nah. I got a bunch of money from the wreck, got drunk, trashed a bar, and beat up some thug. I got 3 years for assault, but I got out after 18 months. The other man chuckled. So you got a high-class girl, but it cost you 18 months in jail. Was it worth it? No girl is worth jail time, but that's not the worst of it. I had to pay all the money I made from the accident to another lawyer to defend me against an assault charge. I could have gotten 10 years, and here I am shoveling rocks and cutting grass for these bastards. If the broad is still here, why don't you do the same thing again? Hell no. She's out of luck, but I sure could do it. That dumb bitch can be talked into anything. I'd heard enough from that bastard already. I finished getting dressed and went to find Lenny. He was in the garage working on one of the lawnmowers. Hi Lenny, I said. Hello, Mr. Abear. What can I do for you? Are you aware that the new caretaker went to jail? No, sir. I just heard him tell Bruce that he was sentenced to 2 years but was released after 18 months. What did he go to jail for? Did he say? It doesn't matter. We don't hire criminals. He lied on his application. That's what I thought. He said he got drunk and attacked some guy. Jesus. That's all we need. A convicted felon assaulted a club member. Thank you, Mr. Abear. He'll be gone in 15 minutes. A short time later, I was sitting with Judy and saw his bright orange truck rushing down the driveway. He turned onto the road and rushed forward. A couple seconds later, I saw the blue lights of a police cruiser coming after him. I laughed out loud. What's so funny? Asked Judy. I just thought karma could be a bitch. I enjoyed my Reuben sandwich and beer. Probably better than I should have. I found out later that when Lenny fired him, he pushed Lenny, so he's going back to jail for parole violation. Plus he's going to be prosecuted for assaulting Lenny. God bless that karma. Somewhere in there Mark was offered a promotion if he moved to Houston. He and Crystal were still not in touch, so he accepted the promotion. Shortly after he moved, she came over and wanted to talk to him. She cried when I told her he had left and called him. The next weekend, he came home, they reconciled, and she and her 2 kids moved to Houston. 2 months after our first date, Judy and I had a good time. 6 months after that, she sold her house and moved in with me. A year later, we were married and had a reception at the country club. I had just used the men's room and was on my way back to the reception when I met Lauren in the hallway. Are you happy? She asked. Yes, very much so. I replied. I'm happy for you. It was a long time before I saw her again, and in a small town like ours that was almost impossible. I happened to walk into her father's office to pick up a document for a friend of mine. She was still the receptionist, and on her desk hung a sign. Mrs. Haybert. We said hello, she handed me the paperwork, and I left. Over the next 10 years, Judy and I had 3 children, and she and her sister Teresa started working together. I am still a teacher, and I still love it. Mark and Crystal still live in Houston and have 2 children. Lauren's father threw a retirement party at the club. I wasn't invited, but Judy and I had dinner there that night. He saw me and came over. I'm sorry things didn't work out with you and Lauren. Maybe it's for the best, I told him. Sometimes I think I did, and sometimes I'm not sure. I don't know if you know this, but she lives with her husband in Wyoming now. They have a ranch there and they seem to like it, but we wish she were closer to us. Isn't the most important thing for her to be happy? By staying here, she could constantly remind herself of the things she doesn't want to remember. We've come to that conclusion, so we'll live with it and visit her as often as we can. We shook hands, and he went back to his party, and I went back to the love of my life. Reaching our table, I leaned over and kissed her. She smiled. That was really sweet, but what was that for? I kissed her again, softer and slower. I, 25 male, and my girlfriend, 24 female, met 3 years ago at a party my fraternity was hosting. Admittedly, I was pretty wild toward the end of my college experience. I felt like I had everything figured out, and the last semester I was in school, I had a huge case of senioritis. When I met my girlfriend originally, I thought it was just going to be a hookup. However, I quickly realized that she and I had something serious between us. We started officially dating, and we were monogamous toward each other. We both graduated and got jobs after college, and about a year after we decided to move in together. Both of us were new in our fields, and we were doing everything in our power to work our way up. My girlfriend wasn't very happy with her job. She felt like she was being overlooked a lot of the time, and some of the tasks that she was doing seemed disrespectful compared to things some of the other employees were doing. It ended up paying off for her because she was offered a promotion directly by her boss. She had a lot more responsibility, and she got quite a large pay raise alongside it. The initial job description she gave me didn't make it seem like she would be spending a lot of late nights at the office, but every so often I would get a text message saying that she wouldn't be coming home for dinner. I'd offer to bring her food or stop by and help her out so she wasn't there too late, but she always declined. I really trusted her, so I never thought anything was happening. I believed everything she said when she told me she was working. A couple of months after she got her promotion, she told me that she would be traveling to a conference for work. It was going to be across the country in Los Angeles. There were a ton of things she had always wanted to do, and several of them were in California. We had talked about vacationing there together before, so I suggested that it could be fun for me to take the time off work and join her. She quickly shut that idea down. I was hurt by how fast she rejected it, but she just told me that we couldn't afford the lost time. I moved on from that pretty quickly, and I was just happy for her that she was finally going to get to go. The weeks leading up to her business trip were mostly uneventful. A few days before she left, we got into a small argument about our relationship. She had been staying late at work more often, and I felt like she wasn't being attentive, so I confronted her about it. She was really defensive and tried to tell me that she'd just have to work harder than I did to get places in life. Our different upbringings have been a point of contention with us in the past, but I hated when she brought it up. I have been lucky enough to have familial connections in my industry. I grew up in an upper-class household, and I was able to afford to go to good schools. I was a legacy in my fraternity, and I had plenty of contacts thanks to my family. My girlfriend didn't have any of that, and she would often throw it in my face as if I didn't deserve any of the accomplishments I'd made. After the argument, things were a little awkward, but she promised me that we would talk more about it when she got back from her trip. I told myself that I was just going to forget about it and let her enjoy her time while she was there. Before she left, she told me that she would call me every night that she was in California. I had actually been looking forward to it because I was interested to know what she was getting up to. The first night she called me and gave me a rundown of her entire day. She was somewhat jet-lagged and exhausted from the plane ride, then so there wasn't much to report. Though on the second day I was waiting by the phone at the time we set aside to call, and she never reached out. I ended up texting her to see what was going on, but she didn't reply until the morning. She told me she passed out and didn't set an alarm. I accepted that. She had given me no reason to doubt that story, so I believed it. Once again the following night she never called me. I felt kind of foolish just waiting by the phone for her to reach out. I ended up getting an invite to a party a friend was throwing, so I went to that instead. Aside from texting every so often, I didn't talk to her for the entire 5 days she was in California. I was excited for her to come home, but at the same time I knew that we were going to have a difficult conversation. When she finally got back, it almost seemed like she didn't want anything to do with me. The distance between us seemed to have tripled in the short time she was gone. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just didn't want to talk. It was incredibly frustrating trying to deal with her when she was putting so little effort into communicating. So I took to the internet to try to figure out what was going on. From everything I could gather, it seemed to be a logical conclusion that something might have happened with another person outside of our relationship. I didn't want to believe that she was cheating on me, but I needed to at least rule that out. I didn't know how to ask her about it, so the first chance I had to look through her phone, I took it. We knew each other's passwords, so it wasn't hard getting in. The difficult part was trying to figure out what I was looking for. I looked through her pictures and I didn't see anything. I didn't find anything in her recent messages that was alarming. I ended up searching through the messages for some keywords that might tip off anything serious going on. When I typed in the word together, a lot of different messages came up. However, I was able to read from the snippets of text that there was somebody who had recently messaged her about wanting to be together. I clicked on the messages and I read through all of them. I didn't know the man she had been texting, but from what I could gather, it was a coworker. Apparently, they had been sleeping together for some time. The man was asking her when she was going to leave me. I didn't know if she had told him that she planned to, or if he was just assuming that she would. I was going to make it a lot easier for her and break up with her. It was clear that she didn't want me to go to California with her because she planned on spending the week with him. It all made sense why she hadn't been available to talk to me during that time. I felt heartbroken initially. That was the last thing I expected her to do, and I was shocked to find out she was cheating. When I read about other people in similar situations online, I assumed that it just wouldn't happen to me, but I was wrong. From their messages, I was able to glean that she and her affair partner had been fooling around on the job. She had done me dirty, so I wanted to make things a little more difficult for her. I knew how hard she worked to get where she was in her company, so I knew how hard it would be for her to lose it all. A couple of nights passed and I played it cool. I stopped pressuring her to talk about the distance between us, and I just accepted it. One evening, she texted me at 4:30 p.m. telling me that she was going to be staying late at work. I knew that was her basically saying she was staying late at work to sleep with this man. I replied and told her that it was okay, and then I would put a plate aside for her in the microwave for her to heat up. Of course, I took that opportunity to go find proof that she was cheating on me. No employer wanted to work with people that were having sex in the offices, so I thought if I could get some evidence, I could show it to her boss. When I walked in, the building was pretty much empty aside from a janitor. I had to lie and tell him that I was an employee that had forgotten their keys. My girlfriend's office was practically empty, though after a minute of snooping, I was able to find her and her affair partner in what was very clearly their boss's office. If I had been worried that their relationship wasn't going to get them both fired before, I knew right away that proof of them sleeping together in his office would. I was as quiet as I had ever been while I took a video and a couple of pictures of them. I was able to get the boss's information through the company's website. I reached out to him, and after a few days, he contacted me and told me he wanted to see the evidence that I had mentioned. I brought it to his office in the middle of a work day, where my girlfriend saw me walk in and showed him. My girlfriend was surprised to see me, so she knocked on her boss's door and asked me what I was doing there while trying to pull me in for a friendly hug. Her boss just glared at her and asked her if she could take a seat before dismissing me from the office. I stood on the outside of the door for a minute while I listened to him fire her. She stormed out and stood in front of me completely shocked. I doubt she had any idea I even knew about the affair before that. I ended things with her right there in front of all of her coworkers, and I told her that I wanted her out of the apartment. She tried to play it off like it was her decision because she wanted to be with the other man anyway. If that were truly the case, why wouldn't she have just left me to begin with? It's been about 6 months since all of that happened, and I haven't heard from her. We have a lot of mutual friends from college, and they have told me that she is actively looking for a job. She's been doing online insurance sales in the meantime, which is absolutely nothing she planned to do. As far as they know, she's also single, so I guess it didn't work out with the other guy. OP, sorry you had to go through something like this. It really sounds like you were putting in the effort to try and make the relationship work when she wasn't putting any in. Her distance in the relationship was definitely from what she had with the other guy. I will never understand why people will pursue another person when they're in a relationship, especially if they really want to be with the other person. It's okay to break up with somebody if you are no longer in love with them, but cheating on them and leading them to believe the relationship is more than it is awful. I hope that you're able to move past this and find somebody who does really value you and won't throw away what you guys have. I wish you the best of moving forward. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I have been married for 12 years. We met in a grocery store after there was a huge rush to go in and buy the essentials before a hurricane. We were both scrounging around in the bread aisle searching for anything we could purchase. We started talking and we really hit it off. 15 years later, we are married and we have a beautiful family of our own. During our initial dating period, I realized that we came from completely different backgrounds in regard to our families. Mine was much more traditional, not necessarily in a good way. We weren't super close. I had a father who was not very involved because he thought that child rearing was a woman's job. Her family was everything I wished mine was like growing up. She had several brothers and sisters. Her parents were always involved in her life, and they all genuinely seemed to enjoy being around each other. I was welcomed into their family with open arms, and I had never been happier. My wife's involvement with her family was something I admired, and I hoped to be close to them as well. Her youngest sister was 8 years younger than her. She was probably one of the family members she was the least close with because of the age gap. So, when her sister reached out about needing a place to stay, my wife welcomed her. She thought it would be a good opportunity for them to spend time together and bond in ways that she had with her other siblings. Her sister was going through a tough time in her life. Her boyfriend, whom she had been with for years, had been injured at work and couldn't go back. He was receiving disability payments, but it was only a portion of his salary, and they were having trouble paying the bills. They were just going to stay with us until they knew what to do about moving into a new place and getting new jobs. Everything was great at first. I loved seeing my wife with her sister. I could tell that they were both happy to have the time together. I also really enjoyed spending time with her boyfriend. He was a lot younger than me, but we still had a lot in common. The trouble started when my sister-in-law found a job and her boyfriend didn't. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. It was in the middle of the school year, so she was home alone with him for about 8 hours every day. Never in a million years did I think that they would be sleeping together during that time. The first thing I noticed that clued me into their relationship was finding a pair of boxers in my bedroom that didn't belong to me. I asked my wife about it, insinuating that there was only one other man in the house. She laughed it off and told me that it was probably something that she dropped on the floor when she was doing laundry. I wasn't entirely satisfied with that answer, but I didn't have anything else to prove that she was being unfaithful. A couple of weeks went by, and nothing else happened. I was starting to think that I was overreacting when I saw the boxers, but then I smelled his cologne on my pillow. It's one of those things where you know that you're not wrong, but it's difficult to prove. I sleep on that pillow every night. I know what it smells like. When I told my wife that it smelled like another man, she thought that I was hallucinating. She assumed that I had been paranoid and was thinking of anything that would align with my story. My gut was telling me that something was wrong, so I needed to prove it. The next day, I installed a nanny cam in her bedroom to see if I could catch her in the act. Surprisingly, it didn't take long before I got the evidence that I needed. Just 2 days after the installation, when I checked the footage, I saw my wife in bed with her sister's boyfriend. Divorce was the only option for us after I saw that. I had no intention of trying to reconcile what we had before this. Honestly, I wanted to hurt her the way that she hurt me too. She was so happy to be getting closer to her sister, and I was going to ruin that. When I told her sister, I knew that it would ruin her relationship with her entire family, and I didn't care. She was ruining someone's life, and she needed to suffer the consequences of that. On top of doing that, her sister's boyfriend had been claiming disability after his work accident, but I highly suspected that it was fraud. I didn't say anything when I noticed it at first. I didn't think it was any of my business, and I liked the guy. However, he slept with my wife, so I thought it would be good to report him. I called the Social Security offices and reported him for suspected disability fraud, which they told me they would be promptly investigating. After that was done, I texted my sister-in-law and told her that we were all going out to dinner and to meet at a restaurant. While we were there and away from the others, I showed her the evidence that I had. I explained how I had been suspecting something for a while and that I needed to get the evidence for myself. She was hysterical when I showed her. She trusted her boyfriend with all of her heart, and she trusted her sister even more. When she calmed down, we both went back to my house where I confronted my wife about what happened. My sister-in-law was standing behind me, sobbing the whole time. It was completely inexcusable, and she couldn't even come up with anything to say other than saying it didn't mean anything. I helped my sister-in-law pack her things so I could drive her to her mother's house. She didn't want to be around either of them, which was understandable. When I got back home, my wife was waiting for me. She was furious with me for some reason, claiming that I had no right to tell her sister about the affair that I caught. She also said that I had unlawfully gained the footage of their affair and demanded I turn it over to her. Of course, I refused to do that because it was evidence that I would need for our divorce. When I told her that, she practically begged me to forgive her. She didn't want a divorce because that would mean that I wouldn't be there to support her anymore. I told her that I was going to be staying with my brother and that I would give her a week before she should be out of the house. It was all in my name, and she had no claim to it otherwise. On top of that, I told her that she needed to make sure her new boyfriend was out of the house too. I was afraid that if I had to see him, I might attack him. Several weeks went by, and my wife had moved out of the house to stay with her aunt. None of her family wanted anything to do with her after what she did. I figured they might take her back at some point, but they would need a lot of time and their relationships would never be the same. The boyfriend ended up having to go back to work because the Social Security office deemed him fit to do so. I got a hateful voicemail from him complaining about how vile he thought I was for reporting him to the office. I just ignored it. My wife and I ended up getting divorced. The funny thing is, I think I am more involved with her family than she is. I didn't want to take my children away from that side of their family, so I stayed in the same neighborhood, just in a house. They're all still very upset about what she did and are trying to find ways to move on. As for me, I don't know how to date anymore. Everyone is telling me that it's about time I start trying again, but I'm honestly afraid that something similar is going to happen. I don't want to put myself out there again only to have somebody betray me like this. Opie, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. The fact that your wife cheated on you with her sister's partner is upsetting. You're supposed to be able to trust your family, and your wife completely disregarded that. She was extremely selfish when she slept with the boyfriend. I think you did the right thing by telling your sister-in-law. From what it sounds like, she was working really hard to support the life she had with her boyfriend, and he was cheating on her. Both of you deserve so much better than the partners you had. I think it's great that you're still in touch with her family, especially knowing that she is barely in touch with them. I really hope that you and your former sister-in-law can find ways to move past this and find people that truly cherish you and respect you both. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.